This is Dr. Famin and Raja Faisal with COPAIR'S Strategic Bytes. Today we are starting a new series of discussion on the global issues that really matter for all of us. Today's discussion will be about the meeting that recently took place between the Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Sir, Assalamu alaikum, sir. Sir, my first question to you is that the Chinese president and the Russian president called on the West to abandon the Cold War ideology in their meeting ahead of the Beijing Olympics. So, how Beijing might see the benefits from the Russia-Ukraine crisis?
First of all, I would like to elaborate a bit on whatever is going on in the west of Russia. Obviously, when we talk about the Ukraine crisis, we need to look into the historic perspectives regarding Ukraine. Of course, we know if the ground realities we look into, then the Donetsk area, it is predominantly inhabited by the ethnically Russian people. So if we look at the population of Donetsk and its surroundings, then we would see that around 85 to 90% of the population is ethnically Russian. So they have always been inclined towards Russia and they always relied upon Russia. And if we look at Kiev is obviously pro-West, and it associates itself with the Western powers. But if we look at the current scenario, right now around 95,000 troops, the active troops, they are stationed by Russia on its western border with the Ukraine. And of course, Ukraine and the Western powers, they are predicting that anytime soon Russia would be, invading Ukraine. But this is not the case. Of course, if we look at the Putin and his associates, of course, they simply say that our troops are there just for the normal exercises which we are conducting there, and they are conducting the exercises. But of course, there are skeletons in the closets of the Westerners when they talk about the invasion of the Russian. They do it just because of one reason, that they know that when Crimea took place in past, the invasion of Crimea suddenly happened and nobody could stop it at that time. And current situation of the crisis is that if we look at the Germans are playing very smart, and they are very reluctant into talking about the issue because they know that impact of any invasion or impact of any conflict would be dire for them. And if we look at the French are of the view that they should, support the talks and help to initiate the talks. This is why we are seeing that, Macron, he met with President Putin, and of course they had a lot to talk about. And it's been reassured by President Putin that they don't have any kind of plans to invade Ukraine or anything like that. To be very fair, if they ever wanted to do it, it was very easy for them to do it because, as I earlier mentioned, the population, predominantly population of Donetsk and the area, the troubled area, they are Russian anyway. And the biggest problem is with obviously British and the Americans. Americans are towing their policy of anti-Russia narrative. They always had that. And if we look at the British, the recent remarks by British Prime Minister, it was very odd in terms of they took it to themselves. And even if I recently talked with one of the professors of international relations from Birmingham University, and he himself said it, and he started laughing on it, that they do not agree with their Prime Minister Johnson because they believe that we should have played smarter game in this. We shouldn't bring it to home because they started saying that businessmen who hail from Russia, they already have property stakes in and they have investments in Britain, and they want to put a cap on it, and they want to sanction them. And if they do it, then of course it would be a problem for the businessmen from Russia. And the current situation, as it looks like, is that of course NATO is playing the key role. Everybody is standing, the Western powers are standing behind the NATO, and NATO has a plan to influx more troops into Romania, not for stopping the invasion. If there is an invasion, they proclaim that they would be there if increasing the troops, just because one reason, that if there is a humanitarian crisis, then that would be tackled easily. But I think it won't happen that way, and they are just exaggerating, and they're just implying pressure on Russians. And this is how the whole setup is. And if we look at the Beijing, I think at this hour, Russia needed Beijing the most, because Beijing is a key player. Beijing has economic sort of collaboration with the Western powers, and they have bilateral trades with them. And I think it would be very sort of important to look at how things shape up in future. But it was a very important meetup that took place very recently between President Xi and President Putin.
So, sir, do you think the conflict in Ukraine could divert the US strategic focus from Indo-Pacific to Russia?
Not necessarily, I won't say that, because that is entirely a different theater. And if we look at Asia Pacific, that is more important for Americans. If we look at the Joe Biden stance and Joe Biden's foreign policy preferences, we know it very well that he categorically said very recently that his focus when it comes to diplomacy is China. So his focus of concern would remain China. And if we look at the AUKUS and Quad and all of these alliances that they have created for Asia Pacific, that is entirely to contain China, and to contain China in South China Sea and in East China Sea. So the focus of America, the West, would always remain on that side. But when it comes to obviously the Western, obviously Ukraine would be playing a role, but not of that magnitude, which is of because the biggest threat for Americans right now is not from Russia, but it is from China, because at this hour, it is not the military might we are talking about, it's the economic might we are talking about. And if we talk about the economic might, who can challenge Americans? Only Chinese can challenge Americans, because if we look at the Russians, they have boosted their economy in recent past, but of course they want to sustain it. But if we look at their economy, they have a lot to offer in terms of energy needs and all of that. But when it comes to their productions from the West, nobody, and from the larger world, nobody is relying on Russians except India in terms of buying the weapons from them. So even if we talk about the weaponry and all of that, their business, the military business, is not of procurements, is not of that magnitude that can be scared of. So Americans, I think they have focus on Ukraine, but if we look into Asia Pacific, that would remain the primary issue for Americans.
Sir, in this regard, my third question to you is that what do you think are the implications of this meeting for India, especially when it is realigning its ties with US and Russia?
A very important question, and a very interesting one as well, because the situation right now is shaping up very interestingly. If we look at India since 6-7 years, India started placing itself as or portraying itself as a front line of America against China, because they could see that economic trade war is going on between both of them, and they want to gain. They want to grab on it as big as they can. The only reason behind it is that they have a huge population, and they are the only other billionaire in terms of population if we talk about, because first one is Chinese and the second one are Indians. So India is smartly playing right now, but it would turn out to be a disaster for them. To me, I believe it is going to be a disaster for them. But if we look at the procurements that they procure in terms of military equipment, they do from Russia. And this meetup, of course, President Putin, President Xi, when they met, I'm pretty much sure that they did talk about it as well, because as they are, buying it from them, Chinese in coming future, they will be highlighting the fact with the President Putin as well, the Russians, and they will highlight that the equipment which is being given by Russians to Indians, it is being used against China when it comes to Eastern Ladakh, when it comes to Arunachal Pradesh, whatever the installments are of India, they are going to be used against China. And we know the conflict, the Gulf conflict is not dead yet. They have met for 14 times for talks. They failed. And in coming past, they will not be passing it anything. I think it is a very crucial time for India, a time to ponder upon, and it would have consequences for them as well in coming future. And we might see India shifting its reliance entirely on Americans. And by the way, if we talk about shifting the total reliance on the Americans, it would mean that a huge chunk of their economy, with billions and billions of dollars, they would go towards America. They would end up towards America, because Americans, they have their equipments, they're very expensive ones. So recently we saw India bought S-400s from Russians, and it cost them around each of them, it cost them $1.1 billion. And if we look at the procurement, it was quite important, but of course Chinese, they had reservations on them. So in coming future, India would be facing that kind of problem. So I see it as that if Russia has aligned itself with China, then of course China would have some requirement from Russia as well. So if Russia wants China's alliance globally, then China would seek the same against its foes. So this is how the game would play.
Sir, my last question to you is that what are the prospects of this meeting for Pakistan, considering its deep-rooted ties with China and its approach of strengthening its ties with Russia?
Look, anything which has been going on in China in recent days, I think it is going to be beneficial for Pakistan. One fact I want to highlight, that right now the situation was that two prominent leaders of the world, one Prime Minister Imran Khan, the other one President Putin, both of them, they were in Beijing, and both of them, they met with President Xi. And I think it was very important, and it should be looked at it, with an angle that the way things are moving in the region right now. Of course, trade war between US and China. I think, and to some extent, obviously Pakistan and Russia both are attached to that. If we talk about BRI, it's important for Russia. If we talk about CPAC, that goes through Pakistan, and if we talk about Gwadar, that is going to be the key port for China as well in this side. So to me, I think things are very important for Pakistan, and why I believe that it was a favorable situation for Pakistan, because the implications earlier we discussed about the implications for India, they are going to be a sort of a benefit for Pakistan, because if we talk about the Russia and uh, China's alliance, then of course we need to talk about whatever is going on between India and China as well. So if India is portraying as frontline for the Americans against China, then of course this alliance would play similar against India in coming future. And at the same time, of course, it would be a sort of benefit for Pakistan, and especially in Asia Pacific, especially in the Indian Ocean, and it is going to be the key. And to me, I think the way things are shaping up right now, Pakistan would gain out of it, and India would lose out of it. And in coming future, the threats would be considered as common threats, and benefits would be considered as common benefits for China, Pakistan, and Russia. So I think this is how things are aligned for Pakistan. So it's a win-win situation.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insightful remarks.
Thank you.
That's all from our side. Thank you so much.